what you're dealing with right now, do you think that your 80-year-old self is going to be still worried about it? Do you think your 80-year-old self is going to regret that, possibly? Maybe, depending on what it is. Do you think that your 80-year-old self will be proud of what you're doing right now? To start interjecting a couple of the clips from the programs that I actually do, and when I work with students, what am I actually teaching and what am I actually talking about? And then we can kind of review some of those details. So we're going to start this today, and I'm going to play a clip from a recent gig that I did upstate in Westchester, New York, which was through Dobbs Ferry High School. And it's just a short little clip of me talking about some of the dumb decisions that I used to make when I was in high school. And this was some of the side effects of what I did to my mom and the pain and fear that I put her through. So let's take a listen.
So how did I repay her? How did I repay Mom? Well, I repaid her by staying out all hours of the night, any day, anytime. And I remember one night I scared her probably the most she's ever been scared in her life. Because it was a weekday. I was a full-time employee at this point, and I was still living at home, and I was out partying, bro. Oh my God, we were going hard that night, yeah. My phone died. Raise your hand if your phone has ever died, and then your parents like freak out when they don't know where you are. Yeah, that's because you're their babies. I came home at 5:47 on a Wednesday when I had to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning for work. She walks in the living room, and between the tears and the anger, I realized that I don't think I've ever seen my mother more upset in my life. You see, guys, when we come back to this point of limiting beliefs, when we operate our lives from a place of lack and we don't feel like we're enough, we're going to make selfish decisions. And you know it. You've experienced it before. So how do we deal with the problems in our lives, the stress, the anxiety, the uncertainty about this time in our lives? It's very uncertain. We have to have tactics to be able to deal with it.
That's that. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. And while many times in my life I did right by her, there was many times that I didn't. And to this day, if we were able to ask her, was Kevin a good kid? She loved me more than life itself, of course. And that's one of the reasons why she was amazing. But she would, of course, say, no, he was amazing. I mean, yeah, no, but he was just incredible. Like, she loved me too much, to a fault. And the reality here is this is a common theme amongst students and parents and children and parents, just scaring them half to death because students and kids don't, of course, understand what it's like to be a parent. They don't understand what it's like to love something more than yourself. And they shouldn't because they're a kid. That's the part of growing up. You don't know that until you're in it. So how do we possibly talk to students about maybe this specific issue? If they're having an issue with their family member, if they're having an issue with their mom or their dad, whether they're right or wrong, how do we navigate that? Well, I think there's a really interesting word that we can go down and talk to them about, which is regret. So what I want to do today is I want to teach you 3 different ways that you can possibly have a conversation with the student that you're thinking about regret. Because what regret does is it gains perspective of what they're doing. Because after what they do is done, they cannot go back. There's no DeLorean. We can't go back and fix it. So how do we understand regret? There are 3 ways that I think, there's a million different ways, but I think there's 3 really effective ways. One way I have talked about before on this show, I think is so awesome, is from Tim Urban's TED Talk. And this is something he created, which was the 90-year calendar. It is such a cool thing because what he did was he put 90 boxes. No, not 90 boxes. What's the week? 90 times 52, I think. He put a whole bunch of boxes on a page, And each box represented a week of somebody's life who on average would live to 90 years old. It's a great life. And when you look at this chart and you look at all these boxes, you come to look at there's actually not that many boxes. When you think about how many weeks are in somebody's life, you think of a huge number. There's really not that many boxes. Now, you can also use this calendar on the flip side. There is actually, when you really look at it, a ton of boxes compared to what a high school student has used up already and how much of their life is in front of them. So different things you could use this calendar for. But in this case, you're going to use it for the idea that there's not a lot of boxes. And what we want to do is we want to understand that we need to use our time extremely wisely. And I say wisely, not in the sense of, oh, I'm going to study harder and be more productive. I mean, be wise. Be wiseful. I don't know if that's a word, but be wise and be respectful and be understanding and have the perspective of what, if they're up here on this calendar, what their parent might be feeling if they've used up maybe half those boxes. And I think that's a really good visual for a student. The second tactic I think we can do is talk about what their 80-year-old self would think about what they're doing. And all these tactics are kind of somewhat related, just kind of variations of each other. But if you ask a student, hey, I know you're having some issues at home, or I know this is happening in school. Let me ask you a question. I want you to travel into the future for a second. In your mind, I want you to travel in the future, and now you're 80 years old. You're 80. You got really no time left, maybe. If you're healthy, maybe you do. But you're on the horizon here, and now you're looking backwards a lot. So I don't have to tell you, students today are way too stressed, overwhelmed, and anxious about their lives and their futures. This is why I do what I do. As a youth speaker, I teach students to step back from the situation, see the choices they have in front of them, make great decisions, and build positive patterns around this process. Whether it's substance abuse, bullying, or stress about their digital lives, the students I've worked with have had some great success. So I want to work with your students. I want to come down to your school and your event and actually teach your students the art and the science of making great decisions. So click the link below and schedule your call with me so I can learn a little bit more about what you're looking for in your next speaker. What you're dealing with right now, do you think that your 80-year-old self is going to be still worried about it? Do you think your 80-year-old self is going to regret that, possibly? Maybe, depending on what it is. Do you think that your 80-year-old self will be proud of what you're doing right now? I think that is a really interesting perspective shift as well. Now, the last tactic here is going back into this 90-year calendar by Tim Urban. And I think it's a really interesting, and this is a pretty heavy topic, but I think it's really important, and I think it's very appropriate if you're in that point. If they get here in the conversation, if the setting's right, if the energy's right, it can get really heavy otherwise, though. So we got to be careful on this one. But I think if you look at that 90-year calendar again, and you talk about regret when it comes to the intersection of the relationships with this student and their lives, meaning their mother, their father, their family members, there will come a time where their lives intersect and they will not be there for them. But then maybe, hopefully half, maybe shorter, but even half of the rest of that child's life will be lived, and half of that calendar boxes will be filled in without those people. So once you have half of that available to you, then regret becomes so much more prevalent because I realize, oh my gosh, okay, there is a time that my parents will not be here, while I am living out the rest of my life. So I've got this short time, and then we start doing the math and we say, okay, well, I've got this time, and we start really looking at the hours. Oh my gosh, we've got, if you're a high school student, I mean, they have already spent I think the number is like 93% of their time, of their hours that they'll ever spend with their parents. And when you can drop that bomb on them, it is not intended to make them feel bad or make them feel upset or anything like that. It is intended for them to make a better decision. My programs are all about making better decisions. So if we spin this and make sure we spin this at the end of the conversation and say, okay, 2 words, now what? Now what? You've got this limited time. Like, let's make the best of it. Let's make the best of it. You don't want to look back on your life and regret. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to apologize if it's something that we're doing wrong. If it's something else someone else is doing wrong, then maybe we just have to sit down and have a conversation and find out what they're feeling. Like, really treat your students as an adult because that's how they want to be treated. Granted, some of the tactics and explanations you're going to be teaching them are not something you would use with an adult because they're children. But they want to be respected as an adult, especially when they're dealing with other problems they're having with adults. So I think these 3 simple tactics are a great perspective shift for students to understand regret and understand their time here. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's short and hopefully impactful episode. Please tell me how these tactics, if you are able to use them, how they go, how the conversations work with your student by leaving a comment down below. Maybe you've already had some type of conversations about regret. I would love to hear about it. If you like today's episode, then let me know by hitting like, hitting subscribe, and hitting the bell notification. Every time I release a new video, you will be notified. And if you like today's episode, then I think you also are going to like this one right over here.